everybody. Steve Politi from NJ Advanced Media, and welcome back to the Rutgers Rant. Joined as always, Keith Sargent, James Cratch. Fellas, it has been a while since we have done a podcast after a Rutgers Big Ten victory. We're all a lot younger, a lot less jaded, but here we are. Rutgers 38, Michigan State 27. Greg Schiano's debut could not have gone any better if you handed him a script to write it himself. And look, we've got a lot of things to talk about, personnel stuff. We've got, strategy stuff. We finally can talk about football in a way that it's going to engage fans. I can't wait to do it. I want to bring up two quick points right away. Two things that just in the broader scheme of things stick out to me about this game. The first one is, when was the last time that Rutgers was the team most prepared to start a Big Ten game? I mean, under Chris Ash, I don't think it happened. And the second thing, when was the last time that Rutgers looked like the more confident team during the gut check moments of a game? I think back to it, and Cratch, you wrote about it yesterday, that moment when they turned the ball over twice, a pair of fumbles in their own territory. Michigan State has the ball. I was thinking to myself, this is it. I mean, this is the moment. It was a nice start. At least they can build on some positives here, but this game's going the other way. And then you have that just incredible defensive stand, Cratch.
No, I think that moment right there, I wrote it. That was kind of the moment where you said, okay, all of this stuff about changing the culture, getting Rutgers back to where it was, this is going to ring true. This has happened. That's the situation where, and go back to it. They gave the first turnover after the muff punt, they gave a big touchdown play immediately. It was kind of like, okay, here we go again. The other shoe's finally about to drop. So I think, Michael Dwumfor's stop up front, and one thing that was kind of mentioned to me, which I think could be kind of a indirect kind of hidden thing. I had a high school coach tell me, did Michigan State go for it on fourth down because they were so afraid that Rutgers was going to block the field goal attempt?
Huh.
Because, we saw that they got a lot of heat in right before halftime. So even then, the point was that culture change is evident, to people who watch this team every week, in the sense that maybe Michigan State's sitting there thinking to themselves, they're going to block this field goal if we try to kick it, so we have to go for it. But even then, just a tremendous moment, I think, and kind of it could be one of the defining moments of this season, that they get off the field, they go down, they kick the field goal, take the 2-score lead back, and they don't trail by they led by 2 scores the rest of the way.
Absolutely. And Sarge, we talked a lot about the impact that Schiano could have in the first season. I think we spent a lot of time focusing on the staff he was hiring, on recruiting, on all the things going on behind the scenes, the program building, facility stuff. We really didn't just focus on the one thing that, this is a guy who, just when he has a presence that people believe in, that people follow him. And I think that was evident right from the start.
Without a question. The one thing that stood out to me, and you really want to get to the root of what Greg Schiano is defense. And that defense looked, if you put on the tape from 2006 or 2007, just from the mentality of swarming to the ball, guys stripping the ball. We haven't seen that a whole lot. Avery Young did that. Guys falling on the ball, not trying to dance, not trying to pick up the ball and try to run with it, falling on the ball, cradling it, all the type of things that Greg Schiano would preach during practice. And, they did it. And when you have 7 turnovers, granted one of them was on special teams, but when you have 6 turnovers on defense, it just shows you that doesn't happen by accident. I know Schiano said after the game that you can't count on it every game, but that's what they were doing back in the day too.
Right. And there's so many different ways that defense improved. I thought that they would be better up front, Cratch, but it really looked like they were much better than we even really thought they were going to be up front.
They blitzed. Like, who knew you could do that in a Big Ten football game?
Right.
Just amazing. Amazing what happens when you don't just ask the guys up front, hey, like, beat your man, or nothing's going to happen. No, I thought they had a lot of stunts. They're creative. They rotated a bunch of defensive linemen up front. I think maybe too many guys. Michigan State kind of caught them in transition a couple times, and they had that penalty, legal substitution penalty, where they had 16 guys on the field, it looked like. Julius Turner, I thought, was the best player on the field. It seems like this tilted nose guard position, obviously, you're going to play better teams. And I think, look, not to rain on anybody's parade, but you have to preface that Michigan State did not look like a very good team. I don't think they're going to win many games this season, but the defense was tremendous. They're flying around, swarming to the ball, stripping it, the takeaways. They just looked much more cohesive as a unit, and obviously better coached than we did the last time they saw them.
Right, and I think again, you could have foreseen they'd be better on defense, and you could have even foreseen that they would have won the game. And I got to tip my hat to both of you guys. You picked them to win this game, which I did not. I don't think it's possible to have gone into this game thinking that Rutgers would be like that on offense. And I know that they had several short scoring drives and the turnovers helped, but really, it doesn't matter what if they scored 5 touchdowns on offense in a Big Ten road game after scoring 6 touchdowns the entire Big Ten season last year. I mean, it's just remarkable. And, we saw quarterback competency with Vedral, obviously. Sarge, was there anything that stuck out to you about what the offense did and the style of the offense that made a difference to you?
Well, I mean, it starts with the quarterback. I mean, no Vedral, if there was any question, who should be running this offense, it's him. I mean, he really fits the scheme perfectly. I mean, there were times, and Kratch, broke it down on the film review, which we'll get to that in a second, because, it's been a long pandemic. I think we can all agree to that, Politi, and there's a lot of things that I missed, whether it's going to concerts or outdoor events, but there's probably nothing I've missed more than that film review. So Monday morning when I woke up,
if I had to rank it, Sarge, it would be my kids going back to school would be 1, the film review would be 2, and then seeing my extended family would be 3. I think if I would list it that way. Yeah, go on. I'm sorry.
But so and Kratch, alluded to it in the film review, but there were times where things were just it wasn't schemed. Vedral just made something out of nothing. So I think it starts with the quarterback, continues with Isaiah Pacheco, whose numbers were pedestrian. They got him involved in the pass game. The kid just runs hard. Really set the tempo. What I liked more than anything from an offensive standpoint, I remember a year ago pressing Chris Ash in press conferences. I think it was like a streak of 12 games, 14 games in a row where they hadn't scored a touchdown on the opening drive. They went down 10 plays, 75 yards, capped it with Pacheco running. They looked physical. All that type of stuff is schemed ahead of time. They script probably the first 20 plays. So all that stuff was script. Now Kratch, was right. As far as the rest of the day, they took advantage of short field positions. Didn't do too many sustained drives, but the first drive of the game really set the tone.
Right, and they made a lot of mistakes too, Kratch. I mean, this was not a perfect offensive performance by any stretch, but it was still, you saw the plan and you knew what they were trying to do, and I thought it was well crafted, well executed. Vedral and Pacheco making decisions smart at the line. It was just overall, there was just a lot to like.
No, look, obviously they won the game. They scored 5 touchdowns, and you can't really knock them for that. I thought that Sean Gleason, what Greg Schiano said in the offseason about how he's a guy who designs an offense that fits his personnel. He doesn't try to, jam his personnel into whatever his scheme is. I thought you saw that. I thought they ran an offense that fits the pieces they have. They've got some very talented backs. They've got a quarterback in Noah Vedral who his arm is just strong enough. He can make things happen with his feet. I think he makes good decisions. Even the interception he threw, that wasn't on him. I mean, it was kind of tough because obviously the TV copy, they cut right to the play, but it looks like Giovanni Haskins just ran the wrong route, wasn't where he was supposed to be, and that's where that pick came from. But then again, I just, I look at that offense. I think they did everything they had to do to win this game, but I do wonder, against better opponents, are you going to be able to kind of generate that same sort of offense that they had? Wide receivers, Bo Melton had a good game, Aaron Cruikshank had a good game, but still 5 drops from the receivers. I didn't necessarily see the major strides I think that people are hoping for from that group. So look, I think a lot of it's I always said this was the litmus test, Michigan State, in terms of can this team be competitive in the Big Ten? Can they win a Big Ten game? They checked that box off with flying colors. Now I think Indiana is a big litmus test of, okay, what do we truly know about this team against a really good team as we've seen the Hoosiers are?
Right. And I think you said it there, just being able to compete in a Big Ten game, this offense gives you a chance to at least, have a chance to beat the teams at your level. You're right. Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be good enough to score points against, so leave Ohio State out of it, but even Michigan or Indiana, very good defense. But, at least you saw this from this team that you can hope that maybe this season will be better than we thought. And this is a good point to lead into, Sarge. Does this win change for you what you thought this team was going to get out of this season? And does it raise the expectations a little bit?
Yes. I mean, yes to both answers. I think we can safely say that they're going to be more competitive. Greg Schiano talked about wanting to be to be in the game, have a chance to win as you enter the fourth quarter. I think they're going to be that type of team. I think they're going to be a type of team that are going to be able to do that. Now, Kratch is right. The offensive line, I think they probably disguised a lot of their warts with the ability to kind of float the pocket a little bit. So I think I'm not as confident in the ability of the offensive line. They mixed and matched a lot. I don't think they have a settled lineup yet. I'm not as confident in the offensive line being able to keep it up and Big Ten play the entire grind of it. That being said, I think this is a really good defense. I think the defense has some depth, which we kind of saw from the depth chart going into it. Greg Schiano, I think it was as good as advertised from a game planning standpoint. I think this team's going to be a lot more competitive than we thought.
Right. And I don't know how you feel about Kratz, but I thought going into, if they won one or two games and showed progress, you'd be, okay, this is a good first season. Mm-hmm. Now you look at the schedule, and I watched a lot of Big Ten football, and we'll get into this. It was just a great weekend for the Big Ten. Illinois, Maryland got curb stomped by Northwestern, even Purdue, they beat Iowa, but they didn't look like world beaters, certainly. I don't know. Do you look at the schedule and say, there's a couple more wins here?
Well, I picked them to go 2-7. I thought they were going to beat Maryland. I'll stick with that. Yes, I do look at it and think to myself, hey, Illinois, Purdue, those might be gettable now. And obviously, if you get those, you're 4-4. And I think we're going to talk about it a little bit later. 4-4 in 2020, you're probably going to a bowl game potentially. So yeah, I do think, but at the same time too, I think that Illinois is better than a blowout loss to Wisconsin. Right. I think Purdue on the road at Thanksgiving, if God willing we get that far with this season,
good point.
is mm-hmm. going to be a good team. But do I think that they're going to compete with Indiana this weekend? Probably not. I don't think they're going to be able to really hang with Michigan or Ohio State. Penn State, I think is kind of the great question. I'm sure we'll talk about that later as well in terms of where they kind of stand when they finally come here. I think it's December 5th. But no, it doesn't change too much for me. I thought they were going to beat Michigan State. I still think they're going to beat Maryland. I think the real key is going to be, can they sustain that against an Illinois or a Purdue, which is, as you said, kind of a second-tier, competent Big Ten program. And I just don't know if Michigan State is that right now. So that's why, for me, it hasn't really changed my expectations.
All right, fellas, let's dive into true false. We haven't been able to do this in a while. You know the rules. I'm going to give you a statement. Tell me if it's true or false, and then we'll go back and discuss all of it later. The first one, Kratch just hinted on it. True or false? Rutgers is going bowling. Keith Sargent, true or false?
Wow.
You've had so much time to think about this. You're going
true.
To allow me? True. He went true. Kratch.
False.
Yeah, I got to go false on that now. We'll get to it in a minute, though. Sargent's got a great theory on this. You're going to love it. True or false? Vedral is the best quarterback Rutgers has had since Gary Nova. Kratch, true or false?
True.
Sarge?
Man, one game?
Come on. It's a podcast.
All right. Don't overthink it, right? True.
All right. True or false? Rutgers finally has receivers who can get open, but they still can't catch. Sarge, true or false?
False.
Okay. Kratch?
False.
False in that they can't get open? That's good. Or that they can't catch. I guess that's a bad one. That's a bad question to ask. All right, we'll come back to that. True or false? Trey Avery is off to an All-American level start. Keith Sargent, true or false?
True.
Kratch?
Sure, why not? True.
Why not? True or false? If Spartan Stadium was packed, this would have been a different game. Sarge, true or false?
True.
Kratch?
True, I guess.
Yeah, it's not that one of those venues you get scared of, but it would have been different, I think. Okay, true or false? James Franklin is the nation's worst game coach. Sarge, true or false?
False. False. Not the nation's worst.
Cratch. Is the Big Ten's worst game, Coach? You can be true there. I know Mike Lockley's still in the league.
Yeah, I was gonna say false. Nah, I'd give it to Mike Locksley. Mel Tucker too. I mean,
well, after one game, yeah. All right, true or false? Forget that. The refs hosed Penn State in that game against Indiana. Sarge, true or false?
False.
Cratch.
false.
Yeah, you got to give him the touchdown. It was such a beautiful play. All right, and finally, true or false? Indiana is a 12-point favorite. That seems high. Sarge, true or false?
I'm sorry. I'm going to have to let you go. I'm headed to Delaware right now to place a bet, so I can't really. I'm going to have to get back to you on that one.
Bringing cash money to Delaware. I like it.
I am.
That's a false about that
It's a
being
false.
too
We
high.
think 12 is about right too. Yeah.
I think it's wrong, but not the way you're thinking.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right, let's go. Sarge, let's go right to the pot. What is your bowl scenario? Your Rutgers bowl goes bowling scenario here.
Well, in normal times it would be they'd have to have a 500 record or better in order to be bowl eligible. The Football Bowl Association did away with that criteria, so now technically they could be 1-7 and go to a bowl game. However, it'll be, and I talked to a couple bowl officials about this. There will be a story coming tomorrow about it, but it will be basically up to each conference to determine it. So ideally the Big Ten is going to have 8 or 9 teams that are going to be probably right at 500 or better. So you would think that they would slot it, but then after that, then the bowls will have a little leeway. So there is a scenario where Rutgers could go 3-5. Maybe 3 wins and go to a bowl game. The other scenario that comes into play is from talking to people. There is a strong likelihood that bowls, traditionally, teams arrive 4 days in advance, get to a bowl, do some events. That won't be the case, in the age of COVID, where travel, hotels, all the other things that you're trying to go against. You don't want to do that much travel. So the more likelihood is to keep teams closer to that bowl destination. So that would probably mean that if Rutgers was, in position to be, up for a bowl, that we're headed back to the Pinstripe Bowl. So
wow.
I do think that, look, it's one game. So, there's probably, if you're doing Vegas odds, there's probably more likely than not that they go 2-6 from, as a result of this season. But, I think we can dream. And I think that that's why I said when you ask true or false, Rutgers are going to go to a bowl game. I think this team's going to be better. I think there's a strong likelihood that that we could be looking at a team that's either 3-5 or 4-4 that's going to go to a bowl game.
Cratch, you've got crazy theories and everything. What do you think about this?
So I will preface by saying I'm a little I really think the pandemic was the perfect kind of inflection point for the bowl system to do what they should do, which is that, with the exception of like the New Year's Six bowls and like the big bowls that the Outback Bowl, stuff like that, ESPN owns all of these games. They should rent out a stadium in Orlando for a week and a stadium in San Diego for a week, turn them into basically sound stages, and just literally play bowl games there every day. Fly a team in, superimpose a new logo on the 50-yard line, play the game, get rid of them. I think this is a moment for bowl games. I mean, all due respect to the great people of Boise, Idaho, like, who wants to go to Boise, Idaho in mid-December for the famous Idaho Potato Bowl? But if we could play it in San Diego and just CGI your logo on the field, why not? Let's do it. Play the Bahamas Bowl in Orlando. Who cares? To go back to what Sarge's saying, I hear what he's saying. I just have a couple thoughts. One, doing the top 25, if BYU goes undefeated, they're going to get into the playoff or a New Year's Six bowl. They are an independent. They don't count toward that group of 5 spot. So I think there's a very good chance you're going to have BYU and a group of 5 team. Let's say Cincinnati, because I think they're the best group of 5 team by far. So if you have 2, non-Power 5 teams in the big bowls, that's going to create a trickle-down effect where I think a team like Wisconsin, if Ohio State wins the playoff, gets to the playoff, they might be the only Big Ten team in that game in the Year 6 because the Rose Bowl is the semifinal. So I just think you're going to create a trickle down where you're going to have a team like Wisconsin or Michigan that in a normal year they'd be going to the Orange Bowl, but now all of a sudden they're in the Outback Bowl just because that's how the chips fall. So, and I also am intrigued to see how many of these lower tier bowl games actually get played, given that they can't, like the Quick Lane Bowl in Detroit. I mean, do you really play that game when you can't have fans in the stands? So that's why I tend to think Rutgers is going to have a hard time getting a bowl game. Because A, I don't know how many of them are going to get played, and B, I think you're going to see the Big Ten sending much stronger teams to some of their second tier games than they usually do.
I've got to say something to both of you here. And it's important you listen to this. You need to chop the moment, okay? All right. You're not chopping the moment. This is you've listened to Coach Schiano. This is far and above what we should be talking about. But it's interesting. I will say that. All right, let's do some insider questions. And guys, I got to tell you, we talk about this a lot about, Rutgers winning is good for us. We saw a definite boost in people subscribing to our Rutgers Insider. We're grateful for all the newcomers, everyone who's been with us. Thank you. Your questions this week, we had more than 60 questions, so we can't get to them all, but we're going to try to dive in. And all 60 of you asked this one. Let me start with this. Not sure about the strategy of short kickoffs. Don't like it. And I love this, Sarge. This is what I said this to JP DeMoro, a friend of the podcast, when he said this during the game on Twitter. He's like, what's with the kickoffs? And I'm like, JP, it's like you sat down at the restaurant and someone put like a 48-ounce porterhouse in front of you. And you're looking at it and but the croutons are a little soggy. And his point back to me is a good point. It was a good comeback. He says, well, no one likes soggy croutons. And you're right. But, I mean, to worry about the kickoffs on a day like that, I get it. It was a weird thing. And strategically, I don't know if I agree with it, Kratz. You wrote something about it. Are you worried about the kickoffs? Or is it just something that you choke up to overcoaching?
Yeah, I'm not worried about it just because if you go back to the stats, Guy Fava, the surprise place kicker of the Scarlet Knights, I never thought that Rutgers would win the first Big Ten game since I've been on the beat, and we'd have a place kicker controversy coming out of it.
It's great.
But yeah, I mean, hey, I love it. You know me, I love minutia and weird stuff. So, but no, I mean, last year his kickoffs, Fava, were just 2.5 yards off of Davidovitz's average. He had 2 touchbacks. There's a video I saw, like on social media of him kicking a 60-yarder, off a tee when he was at Don Bosco Prep. I think that was just a strategic decision the Rutgers used. Not a huge fan of it. If you can kick the ball through the back of the end zone, I would just do that. But that being said, I think it was clearly a strategic thing. I mean, look, if they do it again this week, then maybe it's a concern. But for now, I would not panic about it. But you know what? It's really wonderful for the Rutgers fan base that they can sit here on a Monday after a conference game and bitch and moan about the kickoff strategy.
Absolutely. All right, another common question. Was it us or them? Are we good or ... question mark, Sarge? I mean, I think you'd agree that, we talked about a little bit. Michigan State wasn't good, and they were terrible in this game. And that's got to be half of it. But the other half, I mean, yeah, I think you were better, right? I mean, Rutgers is better.
Well, we've made a point. I've written this before, but Michigan State was known for its ability to develop, 3-star recruits. They've never been, in the top half of the Big Ten as far as recruiting rankings, and a lot of that credit went to Mark D'Antonio. Well, he's no longer there, so at some point you probably look at from the talent. They've obviously had some defections with some issues in their program the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. So. Not sure what Mel Tucker inherited. He did take over the program in February, a full 2 months, after Greg Schiano. I know the Big Ten analysts after the game brought that up. That might be fair. So, all that being said, I'm not willing to say that, that Rutgers long-term is going to be, way far ahead. I do know, talking to Greg Schiano in the past, that he has kind of, modeled what Michigan State did. It wasn't so long ago they were, playing in the in New Year's Day Bowl. So I know that's a model for his program as far as, getting, 3-star, 4-star recruits and molding them into, Big Ten caliber players. I know that's a model. I'm not willing to say that Rutgers is going to be light years ahead of this program just yet.
All right, Kratch, why don't you take this one? Which Rutgers player performances on Saturday exceeded your expectations the most? I mean, for me, it's all 5 offensive linemen. I mean, what do you think? Which players stand out that surprised you the most?
No, I think that unit played, very well. I think that, there's a lot of heat on that group, and we'll see how the season progresses, but it was a really good first start, and I thought that the one thing I noticed with all the mixing and matching that they did, with Crimin at center to start, then they brought in Hansen, they kind of moved Palant around, Sam Vretman was in there. I didn't really see a drop-off with any of their various lineups. Obviously, I know that they didn't have the longest drives in the world with some of those groupings, but it seemed like they were pretty solid. I think it's a good sign for them if they truly have, 8, 9 guys they can kind of put in and out. I thought Avery Young had a big day, and that was big for him, in my opinion, just because he's a guy who I thought, quite frankly, regressed last season. Mm-hmm. And, especially he regressed after, to his credit, he regressed after Chris Ash got fired. Chris Ash he's an accomplished defensive backs coach, and I don't think it was a coincidence that group struggled once he was no longer with them on a day-to-day basis. So I thought that was big for Avery Young. And Julius Turner, I thought, was incredible at the tilted nose. I thought he was the best player on the field, and he's a guy who I think they've always talked about him being explosive and having an ability to play, bigger than his size and have quick hands and shed blockers. But it seems like Greg Schiano has finally figured out how to tap that and use him in his scheme.
Is that the nicest thing, Politi, that Kratch has ever said about Chris Ash? That he's an accomplished defensive backs coach?
I know. I think that right now it's going on. He's going to put it on his LinkedIn page as a recommendation. And he might need to update that. I didn't see what happened against Texas this week, but
they beat Baylor.
Oh wow, okay. No, take that back. I think
Baylor then had like 2 kids quit.
Oh boy, yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
All right, this one's for you, Sarge. I'd like to know how the veteran players feel about the coaching compared to the Ash era. What are the main differences? I certainly, they buy in because you listen to the post-game interviews and they're brainwashed from the Schiano's peak at this point already. I mean, what do you think the main differences are?
By the way, you remember how tired we were, all of us, media and fans alike, of chopping every single quote. It got to a point like we would refuse to even use it. It was all the time back in 2010, 2011, and now we're just so giddy to hear it and oh my God, chopping? Really? You chopped the moment? Mike Tverdoff, Avery Young, you get chopped? Really?
How cute! I know, right? It's gonna get old in her again, but that's right now. It's good.
It'll be old by 7:00 on Saturday night, after the Indiana game. So how are they responding? I think the proof is in the pudding. I mean, you're seeing guys like Mike Tverdoff who just they're winning. Kind of solves a lot of it, right? I mean, you know that if you grind out through a long preseason and then they would have lost, then things might be a little bit different. But winning kind of is a testament to the hard work. I watched an interview with Avery Young on BTN right after the game where he talked about just the grind and probably every single Big Ten player. Yeah, probably would say the same thing. But when you win, when you have an upset, when you win your first Big Ten game, like Avery Young, like Mike Tverdoff and Tyshawn Fogg and a lot of these guys have done, I think they're going to buy in, rather quickly.
Right. All right, this is a good one, and it goes into what Kratch wrote about it several times in the offseason. What inspired Coach Schiano to hire a coach like Sean Gleason, given that pro-style offenses were fun during his first tenure? I mean, is it simple as Urban Meyer? I mean, is that the answer, or is there more? Is there more to why he went after Sean Gleason for that offense?
Well, I think Urban plays a big part in it. I mean, I think he got there and he realized this is, for better or worse, this is the way college football is kind of going. I mean, even a team like Wisconsin, I think, is not traditionally, like line them up, I-form thing. I also think that the issue, the NFL kind of going in this direction. We saw on Sunday Night Football, people were kind of scratching their head when the Arizona Cardinals hired Cliff Kingsbury after he got fired at Texas Tech. Looks like it was a pretty good move, in hindsight. So I think it's that, but I think the biggest thing that Gleason has is he is a coach who, as I mentioned earlier, he doesn't come in with a playbook and throw it on table and tell his players, hey, run this. He kind of tailors his playbook and what he does to fit the players. And I think that, is of great importance for Rutgers, because until they, get through a couple of recruiting classes and have all their guys there, they're going to have to kind of, make do with some spare parts and some guys that they didn't recruit and might not necessarily fit their philosophy. I think you saw that on Saturday. They were able to mask, some of the deficiencies on the offensive line. They were able to utilize the receivers they have, put together packages that they let Vedral play to his strengths. I think that's the main reason why Gleason's here. And frankly, Rutgers has to keep him here for a while, which might be tough.
All right, last question, and again, guys, I appreciate you. There's so many we couldn't get to them all. I'm going to let Kevin Fine, our friend out there in Indiana, who was at least in the same general vicinity as the game, or as the big exciting other 1-0 team in the Big Ten. One of the best Schianoisms is a team improves the most between week 1 and week 2 after an absolutely transcendent performance. What would be on the wish list to be fine-tuned? See what he did there, Sarge? I'm going to say. Catching the ball. I mean, there was just too many drops for the receivers. I don't know if they're good enough to have separation yet. I didn't see enough. They've got to shore that up and get better hands. What are you fixing, Sarge? What one thing you need to see the most?
Well, I mean, it should be noted that I did ask Greg Schiano that question, and he kind of went back to the chopping thing and kind of dismissed it. He just didn't want any part of it and said that they need to improve in all phases, which,
right.
Thanks, Coach. But I think
you wanted them back, Sarge.
I'm done. I'm already done.
One bad press conference answer, you're like, oh, gee, this guy. Oh, my God.
So no, I think you're right. I think it's the there were some drops. The Haskins play was interesting because I think Kratch said that he ran the wrong route. I think he just didn't come back to the ball because I think a series or two later, I think they ran the same play, and it was different because he actually came back to the ball. So maybe that was, a route issue, but I did find it interesting that they tried to hit him in the back of the end zone at one point. I think the tight end is going to be more involved than we thought. And I think they have, the makings of a good one in Haskins.
All right, let's go to an Indiana preview. Again, just probably the biggest win. And I don't know. I mean, I don't have the entire Indiana history in front of me, but I'm guessing that's a top 3 type of win for that program. They come here 1-0. Tom Allen has built this thing 5-7, 5-7, 8-5 last year. I think this is probably one of the best teams they've had in a long time, but they still won with 200 yards offense. Kratch, just give me some thoughts on Indiana and give me a prediction here. What do you think is going to happen on Saturday?
I asked Greg Schiano about this. It's kind of hard. Obviously, what they've run on offense, but they were, they didn't have 7 takeaways. They had 3, but, they won their game in large part because their defense put the offense in a position to kind of get, short field, score touchdowns. They got, Rutgers got outgained by, I think, 103 yards. I think it was over 200 for Indiana. I don't really know what to expect. I mean, look, I think Indiana is going to be much better than Michigan State. And I think if you look at the way the series has kind of turned, Indiana's won 4 straight meetings. You and I were there in Bloomington for 35-0 last year where the turnover on the first play of the game, 1 yard passing. Indiana's ahead of Rutgers, and I think the key for Rutgers long-term is if you're going to make moves in the Big Ten, you need to be better than Indiana. That's step 1 to climb over them. I think Indiana's been to the Rose Bowl once. I think it was maybe 1960, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. So I think it's a tough matchup for Rutgers. I think Indiana is a team that I'm not ready to say that they're a Big Ten East competitor yet. I still think they're probably maybe the third or fourth best team in the division, but it's a good test for them. But I do think it's a tough matchup. I think Indiana probably covers that 12 points, relatively easily.
Sarge, your thoughts on the Hoosiers?
The point is that Kratch made toward the end, where he said that Rutgers, for them to ever make the leap, they're going to have to be on the same level. It starts with Indiana, and it starts with Maryland. I think you might have pointed that out in your column as well. It might be a little early. Indiana, looking at them against Penn State, I think they are ahead. The other thing I found interesting is when you kind of touched on it before, just what does home field advantage, do, now? Because Rutgers, had they been playing, I don't know if it would have been sold out, but can you imagine like what it would have been like, at that stadium at 3:30 on Saturday, Greg Schiano's return, coming off a win. It would have been awesome, right? Great atmosphere. Would have absolutely been like the old adage of home field advantage is worth 3 points. Not going to have that. Now look, Rutgers might have taken advantage of the lack of home field advantage with Michigan State, as we brought up. So I do think that Rutgers is going to be a lot more competitive. I think there's going to be a game into the fourth quarter, kind of what, Greg Schiano talked about it being his goal. I think they might come up a little short. I'm going to say Indiana.
All right. Yeah, I'm with you on that. And, I guess if you're like me and you just turned that game on, the Penn State game, when it got really interesting in the fourth quarter, you saw a really exciting game. Indiana was terrible up to that point. I guess Michael Penix was 11 of 29 for like 112 yards or something until they turned it on at the end to steal that game, really. So the one thing that worries me, this is a quarterback with mobility, and I know it's a different defense, it's a different year. Rutgers has struggled against quarterbacks that can move the ball. I'd be interested to see what Rob Smith, the defensive coordinator, and Schiano come up with to counter that. I just have to think about the last few meetings have illustrated where the talent gap was between Indiana and between Rutgers. And I still think that is a big gap to make up in 1 year, even with all the players they've added. I think this is going to be a come back to earth kind of moment, like a 35-14 kind of game for Indiana. I think that this is just a tough one, a tough matchup, a team on the rise. And, Rutgers certainly is not going to be able to count on having 7 turnovers again. All right, fellas, good podcast. Exciting. What else you got? Any final thoughts?
Two things. One, I just checked 1968 was Indiana's last Rose Bowl, so I shorted them by 8 years. Two, the second biggest game, in my opinion, for Rutgers this weekend is Ohio State-Penn State. Here's why. If Penn State loses to Ohio State at 0-2, they're out of the playoff race. They're out of the Big Ten East race. Like, what do they really have to keep them going in life? Their ceiling is probably the Outback Bowl at this point. So I wonder, do they keep that whole roster together? I keep waiting for one of these, top 25 caliber teams that has a disappointing, run for some players to say, hey, I'm going to go get ready for the NFL. I don't need to do this, all the protocols and everything. But two, Rutgers gets Penn State at home late in the season. If they've got nothing to play for, I don't know. Maybe maybe this past weekend wasn't the defining moment of Rutgers season. Maybe it comes against Penn State later in the year.
Wow. Chop the moment there to that one.
I'm chopping quite forward.
You're aiming for the center of a redwood. You're in the sequoias now, Cratch, with that axe. I'm impressed. Sarge, any final thoughts?
I have some trivia.
Yeah. Hit me.
I have some trivia. I think we've done this before. I'm going to open up to the panel here.
Okay.
When was the last time Rutgers opened the season with a conference win? Now, keep in mind, normally they will play a non-conference team. I think Cincinnati in 2009, we know how that turned out. They lost that one. But the last time Rutgers opened the season with a conference win, guys?
Wow. You've stumped the band here. Can you give me a hint? Who was president?
It was the first George Bush.
Okay. All right. God, when would I should know the answer to this then? When would that be?
Was it like 1991 in Syracuse, potentially? First Big East game?
1991. Yep, the first Big East game, 1991. They opened the season by beating Boston College.
Wow. Okay. There you go.
That's a long time. First off, like I said, you normally don't play a conference team, so that's kind of unique. But the last time they actually beat a conference opponent to open the season, the first game, it was.
They win their second. Did they win their second conference game? When was the last time they were 2-0?
I did not look back. I didn't delve that far, but yeah, no.
All right, guys. Thanks for this. Was a good podcast. I enjoyed it. Keith Sargent, James Kratch, Steve Politi signing off. We'll be back after the Indiana game to talk some more football.